Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank everybody who has stayed with us. I think it's been quite a long time already. So first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. Um, there, my name is Jas Santos. I'm from the Philippines. I'm an incoming sophomore at Kunshan University, and I'm majoring at genetics and with a second degree in interdisciplinary studies. And a few things you might want to learn about me is I like bioinnovation, writing, and art, which actually informs my discussion for you today. So I think a question that we've all pondered tonight is how we envision a post-pandemic society. And as I was pondering this question, I came up with a short list of answers myself. So among these are cashless payments, local manufacturing, and masks as everyday fashion. And some of you have noticed is that it's linked to a general assumption that future outbreaks are likely to occur. So today, instead of just giving my own take on post-pandemic society, I would like to discuss with you how our present pandemic has shaped the tools that will help us combat future outbreaks in post-pandemic society. And I will also like to walk you through how these tools help us build an ideal future. So first on our list is genomic and biotech. And so how did the pandemic impact genomic tech? So first is with our ability to test um, uh, COVID-19 positive patients. The speed and reliability of these diagnostic tests like PCR have gotten so much better over the years. As you can see, back in the 2000s, we're only able to test 100 or a couple of hundred base pairs. And a base pair is the code responsible for the physicalities and functions of an organism, for some of you who may not have that biology background. And a decade later, we can see that now we're testing that we can sequence 50,000 base pairs. And today we can sequence 3 billion base pairs, which make up a whole human genome overnight. So what exactly does that mean for our post-pandemic future? So the first thing is it means that society has also become more resilient against future outbreaks. So, for example, here we have like in Guangdong, where they've been able to administer 1.6 million tests. They were easily able to pinpoint the epicenters of their outbreaks, slow down, and even prevent the spread of these local infections. But the second benefit, or the hidden benefit of our enhanced genomic tech, is actually with unrelated illnesses. For example, among the biggest headlines in 2020 and 2019 would be the gene editing to cure sickle cell anemia, which is possible now with our current genomic technology. We also have what you call liquid biopsies, and what these are, we analyze blood samples for certain DNA markers, and these tell us if a person has a sickness, for example, cancer or Alzheimer's, long before the symptoms manifest physically. The second tool I want to talk to you guys about would be democracy, or I guess the state of democracy in pandemic society. So how did the pandemic impact democracy? So here you could see four graphs, and we could see a downward trend for the quality of democracy, and these would be for European countries. There are some very obvious ways that in which the pandemic has shaped the quality of our democracy and prevented us from gathering publicly, and it has also restricted our freedom of movement. So in an effort to control transmission, sadly, some countries are under state surveillance, and there's a huge control with the flow of information. And because of this, there are also plenty of opportunities for leaders to abuse their power, and there's corruption with mishandling of civilian funds. So, what do these trends mean for our post-pandemic society? So, first is um, what we call a phenomenon called democratic backsliding. And what this means is that there is further repression in already closed political systems, and there's a widening power gap between civilians and the military, as we are also experiencing in my country, the Philippines. But the good news about this is that there are also many positive trends. For example, the government is becoming ever dependent also on the people because of the overburdening of basic government functions, and it creates opportunities for social political cohesion. Um, what this means is that we see a strengthening in public and private partnerships, and other people are also encouraged to participate, even young people. So now that I've introduced these two tools individually, I would like to show you how these two tools intermingle to shape the best possible future. The first is how bioinnovation democratizes healthcare. I think this was mentioned by a previous speaker. And I would like to emphasize on the point that while doctors are important today, uh, it's not only their responsibility to keep people safe. And democracy is essentially about the power and participation of common people on certain duties. And among them is keeping themselves safe. And now that we have digital technologies enhanced by COVID-19, there are plenty of ways for us to diagnose ourselves so that the doctors can focus on the most severe cases. This is just a map of the digital technologies that were formed during the COVID-19 season. So it includes SMS and instant messaging. We've improved our diagnostics, as I've said before. These are just some examples. We now have drones that develop medical supplies. We have CPAP monitoring, which is actually CPAP stands for continuous positive airway pressure, and it helps with uh, sleep apnea. And there are also apps that detect COVID remotely. So these are just among the few innovations that were made during COVID-19 time. But genomic and biotech alone cannot protect us from future pandemics. Why? Because there will always be uncertainty. And something that adds to that uncertainty is the way that we cannot predict human behavior. So what if people don't take their medicines, or we don't have the networks to properly reach them for vaccine distribution? So we cannot stop the pandemic without fixing the shortcomings of our own government systems. So the good news is this risk can actually be minimized with public awareness, education, and also vaccine equity. There's actually a study that says that people's ability or their own decisions to whether or not to take the vaccine depends on the availability of salient information rather than their own risks or their own profile. So right now, I want you to also envision like a future society that is fortified by technology and the active participation of its people. So that when we encounter questions like, when do we open public spaces? That's a question that still plagues many developing countries. We would also sort of search for the answers by looking at how do people behave. And with these questions about that take into account the human factor in our decision making, we're also able to reduce the uncertainty of shipments of vaccines and avoid unexpected delays. So to end, I just like to say that the pandemic may seem hopeless for many, but I do think it's worth keeping watch because the pandemic has served as a catalyst for building stronger institutions overall. Thank you.
Not really a question, but I just like to really just commend Jasmine's presentation. I think that is a very optimistic way into looking at what will happen after the pandemic. And I think it's also highly important for us to look at the technologies or like the biotechnologies that we could use. Although you have mentioned also that it also isn't just enough, there also needs to be some action towards some by some other people or not just the doctors. Yeah, I think it's a cooperation really from everyone. Yeah, I just like to comment on that. Thank you.
Hello, Jasmine. So that was a great presentation. I really got a lot. So my question is, do you think that the pandemic actually, that our healthcare system and our technological sector actually benefited from the pandemic? So like, we actually sped up its development.
I think that would depend on the country you're in, actually. But I think overall, yes, it has positively impacted certain health sectors. It has made them more resilient. But I would like to put a caveat there because as we are developing our own healthcare infrastructure, the virus is also sort of developing. So I think it's a matter of keeping up, and it's a matter of being, yes, more proactive instead of reactive.
Okay, thank you so much.